Hey everyone, thank you for coming to another of our historical programs that are co-hosted with the White Lake Historical Society. We're so glad to have you here. If you can't get enough of local history, please come on back Monday evening. We will have our Oakland County historian Carol Egbo presenting Caretakers of the Land, which is about Native American history in our immediate area. So that's also going to be super interesting. We were supposed to be spacing these out a little more, but she was doing an archaeological dig, so we had to reschedule. And Dennis has done slightly less travel intensive research for this program, but we are delighted to have our very own bespoke local history program on the history of our library. So I'll let Dennis take it away.
Thank you very much. Thank you. You're too kind. So you probably guessed what this is about. It's about the history of the White Lake Library. And without further ado, let's look at it. A library is a place where you can read and take out books. Now, you'll see that I use this phrase, a library is, and then you'll see quotes. I was allowed to harass patrons of the library and ask them to fill in everything after a library is. So wherever you see a library is and then quotes, that's what one of the citizens said about this. So a library is a place where you can read and take out books. Now in 1970, because they don't do odd year census, the census of White Lake Township was about 16,000 people. But there was no library here in White Lake. There was no library at all. In 67, the Waterford Township declined to provide library services to White Lake. They had been discussing it, but they turned it down. So White Lake then contracted with Highland Township, the library there, to provide library services for White Lake residents. Now, how are you going to pay for this, right? I mean, things aren't free. We'd all like them to be free, but they're not free. So the Highland Township Library provided the services in exchange for penal fees. This amounted to about $2,000 a year. And I know some of you are sitting there saying, penal fees? What is this? Because that was my first reaction when I saw it. Well, penal fees were a percentage of fines paid to state courts, which were funneled back to local communities that levied the minimum 3/10 mils in taxation to support a library. So Highland is going to provide library services to White Lake people for this. Does this solve the lack of a library? No, thank you. Please speak up. You know, they won't, on the video, they won't be able to hear you shaking your head. So that just won't work. All right, but wait, there is a catch. The state pointed out to White Lake and to Highland that the library should receive at least 3/10 mils in taxes to receive the penal funds. Do we have that taxation in White Lake at this time? No. There was no local levy to support a library. So the contract with Highland was extended month to month while the township officials tried to find a solution. But finally, the contract with the Highland Township Library will be discontinued as of December 31st because of a lack of funds. And then there's another catch. If one catch wasn't enough, we'll have another one. So the Wayne County Federated Library System requires the equivalent of a 3/10 mil payment for services and benefits. For White Lake, this would have amounted to about $10,000, which of course, if we didn't have $2,000, we probably don't have 10. So they would take instead the $1,675, which happened to be the penal fees that I discovered later on. But those funds were not in the township budget, and therefore they were not available to pay. So where are we? Without library service. And then another catch. A library is a place to enjoy your life, but not for the next 3 years in White Lake Township. You know, there ain't no life enjoyment going to go on in the library. So finally, the Township Board on June 5th, 1973, signed a contract with Waterford Township to provide library services for White Lake residents. Now, the cost over 2 years amounted to $1.35 per every man, woman, and child in White Lake, which for 2 years, that's what, 68 cents a person. That's a pretty good deal. And by 1975, 758 White Lake residents had library cards with Waterford. So is there an interest? Sure, there's an interest. But White Lake has no library. Okay. Now comes a crucial meeting on April 5th of 1975. In the annual meeting, which was attended by about 100 township residents, there was a motion to levy a 0.3 of a mil tax to finance library services. And the motion passed 2-1. That is about 66 to 34. It's, you know, and remember, isn't it interesting that 100 residents could have made that decision back then? Made those meetings pretty important to attend. But anyway, so a library is something that every township or community should have, and we are on the path of doing that. So Clerk Vetter submitted a resolution that in part stated a majority of the qualified electors present and voting at said annual meeting authorized a levy of 0.3 of a mil for such purposes. So we have it all official. A library is also dedicated, involved people. Now, so a provisional library board was appointed, and I'm going to give you the names of these folks just because they were the first. I don't intend to list every one who had served on the library board, all of whom are great public servants and citizens. But you want to get out of here before 5 o'clock. So what does 0.3 of a mil buy? Well, not a full service library is one answer to that. Not a full service library. So the library board asked the voters in the 1976 August primary for 1 mil operating for a free public library in the township. So let's let the voters decide, right?
Right.
Okay. So the township board placed the issue of the 1 mil tax on the ballot, and I love this quote. Trustee J. Ernest Lee voted to put the issue on the ballot, and I think he ought to be applauded for that. But stated he was opposed to the issue, terming it too sophisticated for the township at this time. This is a sentiment that will continue for some years, and not just on the part of Mr. Lee. But you know, he's really sort of a perfect public servant in one way. He's against it, but he thinks the people ought to decide. So there was also at this time an offer from the Mott Foundation to provide some seed money to buy books for the library. That would assume that you had the 1 mil, you know, 1 mil you get the seed money. So the voters decided. We had 340 votes for, 1,238. Yeah, wow. Not close, is it?
No.
Not close. Okay. And that one of the striking things as I went through all of this was most of these votes ain't close, and they ain't positive. Okay. Because we had no real concrete proposal, and there wasn't much in the way of promotion. So I mean, there wasn't much of a sales pitch, but you'd still think you could do better than 340. Okay. A library is cool, and I think it's going to be fun. Came from a kid. A library village, 0.3 of a mil, is placed on the November general election ballot. Will we have better luck now? This time the village passes. That's all we got. And this was the first official library board. But where is the library? I mean, we have funding, but we need a physical space. So what do we do now? There's still the contract with Waterford. The library searches for a temporary facility. How about the old township hall? Edson from the library board suggested that if the township brought the old hall up to code, the library could rent it for the library building. Does the library have the funds to bring the old hall up to code?
No.
Well, not if you actually want to open the doors. Okay. Treasurer Ron Voorhees pointed out the floor would probably not hold the dead weight of the books, citing a collapse of the floor during the 1930s during a dance. It must have been a fairly vigorous dance, I would think, but in any event. So, again, just some of these things, quotes I ran into, you just could not include them. Well, so where do we stand? Over the next several years, the library will accrue about $30,000 a year after expenses. But that is not enough to fund the building of a new building or operate the library that would occupy it. I mean, that's, unfortunately, you can't spend the same dollar twice unless you're the federal government. So, a 1 mil levy is needed to set up such an operation. $30,000 is enough to begin a library with anyway. It's a big struggle. So the search begins for a permanent home. Guess where we end up? Township board urges the library to determine construction costs for a new library. Will the township allow the library to be built on township land? No objections if funding for the project can be arranged. That is, you guys arrange the funding, we'll just give you the land. Fair enough. So, what about the old township home? Where have we heard this before? What is a library? A place to pick up books. At last. They're actually going to have a place where you can pick up those books. Okay. Library has to be opened and operating by June 30 to qualify for state aid. Cicely Baker, chosen as the first library director, and there are a number of library directors, and I'm only going to focus on a small handful of them because a lot of them weren't here very long. I think patrons typically didn't learn their names, in some cases before they left. A library is a community gathering space. Cicely was hired as the first librarian. 4,000 books were cataloged and shelved. Most were donated. As the friends who are here know, that can be a mixed bag in terms of donated books, especially people think that libraries lust after your old National Geographic. I am here to say no.
What year was this?
This is 75. So under 300 were purchased partly because they don't have any money to purchase one. Okay. So they were granted a provisional membership in Wolf, and they had an open house Saturday, June 13th. Library services to start on the following Monday, the 15th. So we have a library, okay? It's a hit. People thronged through the library. In 9 months, circulation grew to raise White Lake from second to the bottom in terms of circulation to fourth. Well, it's going up, okay? Circulation was growing at 10% a month, which is a very, very healthy circulation increase. They had issued 1,050 library cards. They were serving 700 patrons a month. So was there a need? Okay. And patrons had borrowed some 10,702 books. Librarians are very precise. And they had answered 225 reference questions. So all of this is really due to a community effort. Volunteers are essential today, but particularly in these early years, you could not have this library function without the work of lots of volunteers. Sue Justice started as a volunteer in cataloging books and eventually joined the staff. I mean, it's one example. Her husband Tom became a member of the Friends. So, do you know what it means to catalog books? I'm married to a librarian, so I've been informed. So books need to be cataloged. books information, that is the title, author, publisher, city of publication, date of publication, has to be added to the library card catalog. Back then, remember, it was a physical card catalog, okay, as opposed to an electronic one. A circulation card or pocket has to be put in the book. That's where you put the card in the pocket. And a spine label indicating the book's Dewey Decimal Number needs to be put on the spine. And there are 4 volunteers, Kay England, Shirley Glantz, Mary Somerville, Carolyn Wagner, who really worked very, very hard in this work to make this possible. So, if you went to the old Township Hall one day, you would find the library wasn't there. Oh, where has my library gone? Okay. Well, it went down the road to Brooks School. Okay. And the reason is, not that the floor collapsed, which certainly might have been a possibility, but the library had simply outgrown the old Township Hall. Brooks housed an adult education program and adult daycare. It was an elementary school, but it was essentially at this point surplus for the Huron Valley system. So White Lake was housed in the school library area because of the need for much more space. By the end of 1982, the collection had grown to 10,000 plus volumes. So, there's only so much you can do. And then volunteers moved the collection. Okay. Volunteers, people probably with their pickup trucks, their vans, etc., move the collection. It's not far, but it's work. Okay. A library is home. The library needed a permanent home. You can't be in various locations as if you're trying to confuse the public as to where to go. Some businesses need to do that, not libraries. After rejecting a millage in the August primary, residents approved in November of 1980, 3/10 of a mill to establish and construct a library. 4,300 yes, 3,000 no. Okay. The 3 mills would generate about 50,000 in income, not an enormous amount of money, but again, remember this was 1980s, and so its purchasing power was better than it is today. So it's all about the money. 3/10 of a mill generated about 50,000 in income. The library board got loans from the 93,000 from the Michigan Farm Home Loan Board in community development funds. There were $12,000 in community development funds, $6,000 in state aid, and the ever popular penal fines. Okay, but every dollar counts. Every dollar counts. So with that, the library board got an architect to draft plans for a modest building that was a little under 3,000 square feet. I don't need to remind you, do I, that there are a number of homes within the township today that exceed 3,000 square feet. So if you think about this as the library, and this is the new home. I'm sure many of you remember it fondly. So where to put the building? Remember, the township offered free land. And so the new library was built on this land. So we have funding, we have land, let's build. In spring of 1985, the new building opens its doors in White Lake. It's still pretty small, but it's all their own, right? All their own. So the final cost for this was $242,566.81, which is why we all love accountants.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the mean value of a home in White Lake Township is, but it wouldn't surprise me if it was more than that. But, now, here's the interior of the old building. Some of you probably remember it. They didn't all have colored film, so that it explains the black and white. So a library is given life by people. Okay. The library was heavily reliant on volunteers and remains so through the Friends of the White Lake Township Library today. So the volunteers are essential. to the 1990s, the revenue of the library was under $100,000 a year. So people like Mary Somerville, Shirley Glantz, Kay England are examples of those who volunteered. They came 3 or 4 times a week. That's pretty heavy volunteer work. They got books ready for processing, typed catalog cards. Boy, that sounds like fun. They shelved books, and to quote someone who was there at the time, they kept the library going. It couldn't have functioned without them. So, a friend indeed. Now, the Friends of the White Lake Library started in 1989, and they supplement library budgets. They bought the first computers in the new building. And that was a great boom at that time. In the past 3 years, that is the past 3 years now, there are more than 30 items supplied by the Friends of the White Lake Township Library. They are a vital support for this building and its activities. And one member of the Friends said, "For us, this has been family." Isn't that wonderful? A library is its staff. Mary Carr, okay? She was first a patron. She had library card 310. So she was a pretty early patron. Okay. She was hired as a children's librarian on October 1990. She did 4 story times a week with a story, songs, and a craft to take home. She did summer reading programs, sleepovers in the library, seasonal programs, and much more. I mean, I'm tired just reading this. I don't know how she found the energy. Also, she was 4 times acting director, totaling 15 months, if you added them all together, which is longer than some of the directors served. Okay, so she had a vital role in keeping the library functioning. Okay. She also was a painter of the program room in the old library with 3 helpers, because it really needed a coat of paint, and she did it. And she is subject to a painting located in this building. I'm going to send you all on a scavenger hunt someday. She is in a painting in this building. It's a small figure, I'll give you that much, but she is in that painting. And she retired in 2020. I'd have retired a good 10 years earlier if I was doing that. Okay. And a library is children. And this library has always attracted children, always been great for children. Okay. A library is a community gathering space. The library provided a great success as people used its services. But with population growth in White Lake, the size of the library failed to meet the state standards for what size you need for your population. It was possible that the library would lose state aid. So there was a need as well for more staff. So millages come, millages go. Now, that's the bottom line on that. 1990, a proposal to increase the millage from 0.3 mil to the statutory limit of 1 mil to be determined each year at a public meeting of the library, etc. Well, that one lost 1,600 to 2,400, a substantial defeat. Okay. And remember, 3 mils does not go as far as you think. There were 7 directors from, this is why I'm not going through any other than the first director, because she had to move mountains to get the doors open, or at least catalog 4,000 books. It's just the same thing. So 7 directors in that 17-year stretch of time, that's pretty quick turnover. Now, this does not include Mary Carr, by the way, who would have been 4 of those 7, or Denise Stefanik as well. And I don't mean to make fun of those directors. The pay here was quite low. They left for better opportunities. Would you be here at White Lake, or would you be the director of Brother Rice's library? So, I mean, that's one example of what was going on. So People left for better opportunities. The staff was small, stretched thin, paid modestly. So that explains the turnover. The state of Michigan library standards in 1980, class 4 libraries, okay, this is us, must employ a director holding a librarian's professional certificate, seems reasonable. At least one support staff with a level 5 certificate, that is a bachelor's degree or higher. Okay. Other than the director, at this time, there were only 5 employees of the college: Sue Justice, Patsy Branson, Carol Burkhart, Mary Carr, and Doug Gerst. Okay, that's it. That's the whole staff of the library. And because of straitened financial circumstances, these folks were cut back to 35 hours a week. Now, you take those staff and you divide them into a calendar week when you expect the library to be open. Is it pretty thin? It's very thin. We can solve this with a special election. You get a theme here about, so interim director Mary Carr, in one of her various interim directorships. This village would allow for the construction of a 35,000 square foot facility, an increase in operating that such a facility would require. Perfectly reasonable argument. Special election in 1997 to bond for $7,705,000 for 76 mills, 0.76 mills, raising just under $470,000. Yes? Which way's the no gonna go? Big, big down. Big, 2 to 1, 2 to 1. You know, what amazes me is that people didn't get tired of trying.
Yeah.
Okay. Brother, can you spare $500,000? So 1998 primary, year later, increase the millage by $500,000? Yes. 1940. So, nope, can't spare it. Okay, can't spare $500,000. Are you sure you can't spare $500,000? Let's ask them. Maybe they didn't understand the question. There's always that possibility, right? So the general election, November 3rd, 1998, asking for a bond proposal.
Yes.
Well, that didn't stand a ghost of a chance. And then proposal 2 for $500,000 operating for 8 years. It passed. Look at that. Isn't that wonderful? So with that, about 45% of this millage was to renovate the original building and build an addition. The remainder would be for operating. So we have millage that will enable them to expand and increase operations. Okay, this is the 2-story addition to the first building that was built. Okay, and here's the renewed library with, here's the 2-story part there you can see. Let me get this. There. I keep forgetting I have these gizmos. So, and in 2008, there is a new director, Larry Ostrowski, and really a new beginning for the library. He was born in Pennsylvania, and I'll let you read the biography. You don't need me to read it for you, okay? He came to White Lake in 2008, and he believed in community involvement. And now, he didn't believe the community should be involved in him. He believed he should be involved in the community. So he was a member of the Rotary Club, the local historical society, the Optimist clubs. He chaired the annual township Christmas tree lighting event. He earned the Optimist of the Year twice, and he was active in his church. To get to know the community, he biked every road in the township in his first year. Okay. And that came from one of the brochures the library sent out. So he saw his role as a servant of the people of White Lake and making the library an integral part of the township community. So that's his goal, and he's going to unleash the power of the library to do it. So he was a hands-on manager. He was not a micromanager. He gave you an assignment. He expected you to do it. He would not ask a staff member to do something he wasn't willing to do himself, He let staff members take the reins when they were ready, encouraged staff initiatives, hardly ever in his office, out among people in the library, often taking a turn at the reference desk, okay, and out in the community as well. Okay. Now, the consequences of this was a real flourishing of the library. One of it was that the library had the first repair cafe in the state of Michigan. Repair cafes were when you brought together people with skills. In this case, it was a seamstress, knife sharpener, woodworker, electrician, a jeweler, and people bring in things to see if they can be repaired. This worked out rather well. In fact, it worked out well enough to someone familiar. Anyway, that White Lake Township Library was invited to participate in the Maker Fair at the Henry Ford Museum. And they did. Another consequences was the Gilder Lerman Award. They had an award for presenting a series of programs on the First World War. It was a national initiative, applications open to all the libraries and historical institutions in the United States. White Lake was one of the 40 to get chosen. That's pretty cool. Larry and the Friends. There was the mini golf. How many of you ever played mini golf? I regularly beat my wife. I just want the record to show.
It's true.
So he solicited merchants for gift certificates for a silent auction that generally accompanied the mini golf. He painted miniature figures, and I'm sure we all remember that. Sports figures, Civil War battlefields, and it was not just hot air. Larry delighted the children and was delighted by them. One way he delighted them was in making balloon animals. He had a lifelike mechanical clock on his desk that purred and breathed. Children would ask permission to pet. Permission, always granted. So, you know, we had that two-story addition, upstairs, downstairs. It's still too small, or it became small pretty quickly. As the township grew in population and demand increased for library services, it became evident that the physical facility was not up to the demands placed on it. I mean, you can only do so much. And the library, once again, didn't meet the standards for the state aid. Now, the state can fudge things for a while, but you know, you can't fudge it. The library board began explorations as to what the public wanted in a new facility. Consultants contacted library users, and I think very importantly, they contacted non-users, because if they're not using it, you want to know why they're not using it, okay? Community leaders and business people. So if we were to have a new library, where would it go? Well, the library found a site in a prime area that the township had and was considering for a new civic center. The library secured that parcel in that area contingent on the passage of a millage. So, does this give you a lot of hope at this point? I mean, I know you all know how the story turned out. Okay, so there is a bond campaign. Okay. By the way, that is Larry and his laptop Larry. And he is after hours. He's not, you know, campaigning during working hours, just in case. So the library, for any election, any public institution can only publish a fact sheet. A sheet that says, if this happens, then these are the consequences. If this doesn't happen, these are the consequences. So the library did that. But a citizens committee headed by Jerry and Roger Harrington sent letters, raised funds, placed signs, worked the polls, and got out the vote. I mean, you know, it's all, oh yeah, I think the library's nice. But you gotta get your butt to the polling place. Okay. And the winner is remember, wait for it, Against. We won. It's a little thin, but a win is a win. Wait, recount, Dracula. So two citizens, for whatever reasons, decided they wanted to finance a recount. And by the way, these are the official tallies I got from the township. So on the recount, after the recount, 26-23 for, against 26-20. That is, passed by 3 votes. So they paid all that money to lose by 1 more vote. I hope they thought it was worth money. So we see that it, now, I know that many of you, if you voted yes, and I know many other people have told me, I cast the winning vote. And you're all right. It took all of those votes to add up to a win. And everyone who voted yes helped cast the winning vote. So let's build. First, we need a plan. Second, will the township partner with us? So there was an initial talk with Supervisor Baroni, Clerk Lilly, and Treasurer Roman, and they wanted to wait. They wanted to postpone construction. But the library couldn't wait. Remember, the state's saying it's too small for the population. Okay? They have no limits on, say, township halls, but how big they have to be. You know, but there are some ratios. And the library board believed it needed a new facility ASAP. So, then there was the question of, can we share a building? Have a building that includes a township office space? Well, the millage language specified that funds could only be used for a new library, not a shared library, not a condominium, not, but so in effect, the library board felt that it had limitations on what it could do as well. So as a consequence, the library had to shoulder the cost of the water line to service its building and the future township site just down the road here, which cost $350,000 plus relocating the entrance of the library parking lot. All of this resulted in the cancellation of the portico. That's why you don't see it when you go outside. And a reduction of space by about 2,000 square feet. But now that we have this approved, it's time to sell the bonds, right? One township trustee holding up his cell phone said, "Who needs a library when we all have these?" Well, I would suggest these people sitting here, for example. But of course, when you say that, you're not seeing the people who don't have cell phones, who don't have computers, who do not know how to use either of them. And libraries do more than just provide information. Can we do story time and crafts on our cell phone? You try folding it and see what happens. There were elements of the community and elements on the township board opposed to the building of a library even after the voter approval. As a result, bonds were issued some 23 months after voter approval. But a majority of the township board finally approved the issuance of the bonds. So groundbreaking was June 14th, 2018. A happy, happy day. Okay. Now, let's go back to Larry for just a minute, because through all of this and all of this turmoil, Larry, his health was dramatically failing, and he will die shortly after groundbreaking. So then there is the construction phase of this building. So once it's built, let's get a move on, right? So here you see things packed up in the old building, put them on the moving trucks. This was not done by citizen volunteers. And those of you who volunteer are probably really grateful. Okay. So there is a grand opening on June 6th. Here we are at the grand opening, and there we are. It is a hit. It is a hit. For all sorts of folks doing all sorts of things, this library is very successful. So what does it take to create a library? Well, it takes an enlightened, committed, hardworking group of citizens, and for more than 50 years, that is what White Lake has had. People who are willing to spend their time and their treasure to help this community have a library. And it's remarkable, and we all them, and I know I'm looking at some of you who are them, we owe you a vote of thanks. Because I was standing out in the field. And we need creative, dedicated, industrious, and helping staff. You know, if you're gonna work in a library, you really have to like people. And you have to be willing, wanting to help them. And you need a leadership that's devoted to serving the community with ingenuity, vision, and energy. You need all these things, and then you need a willing, enthusiastic public waiting for the doors to open. That's what you need last. Okay. So let's go back to the theme of a library is for just a minute. A library is happiness, peaceful, a safe space. A library is home, a place to enjoy life, a place to work. One of the best things ever is so many things. A place to explore other worlds, perspectives. Everything is in the books. You can learn everything. It's everything. Information, entertainment, knowledge, and so much more. Thank you very much.